Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Riyal Deal Plus, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English headquarters. Now, health and well-being are central to Vision 2030, based on the understanding that for an economy to thrive, it must have a healthy population. Well, in this episode, we're going to be speaking to the CEO of a Saudi initiative which is actively working to extend the human lifespan. Well, we're going to be finding out how they're making this happen and what they've achieved so far. Dr. Mehmood Khan, the CEO of the Hevolution Foundation, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us.
Happy to have this discussion.
Now, Dr. Khan, let's start by talking about Hevolution. You're not for profit. You seek to decelerate the aging process and extend the human healthy lifespan. Just tell us a bit more about how Hevolution came to be and what you're seeking to achieve.
We were created by royal decree back in 2019, and our vision was very straightforward, though very profound, which is to extend human healthy lifespan for the benefit of all. Simply stated, we want to have people live longer and healthier as long as possible. The primary goal being to stay healthy and functional. And importantly, we want to democratize this so that it impacts as many lives in the world as possible.
Okay, so you're invested in academic research and biotech startups, all of this with the goal, as you've been saying, of promoting longevity, slowing down the aging process, combating age-related diseases. Just tell us, how are things going so far and what's been the progress?
Well, we started operating. We built the organization, took us about a year to start putting the people together, ideas and strategies. And then 3 years ago, we started doing sort of publicly visible activities. And we've done this in 3 ways, one of which is what you mentioned, which is investing in biotech companies. But if we step back a bit, the problem with the research field and the investment field in healthy aging, unlike cancer or diabetes and heart disease, which attract a lot of attention, are important, but the underlying causes of most of these diseases is the aging process. And very little attention around the world has been paid to this. And this is the genesis for Hevolution. What is clear when you look at this is there aren't enough ideas and technologies progressing from scientific labs all the way through to biotech companies to the marketplace. So that value chain is really very, very little is coming through, and we saw that. So what did we do? We started funding scientists to generate new ideas. We started training scientists to actually make this an area of their career focus. And then as those ideas are progressing, we provide capital to either create or fund startup companies, with the goal being that eventually these will end up in the hands of either large companies or they'll get scaled themselves. And you'll see these solutions in the marketplace. If you think about it in that way, we would like to think we made tremendous progress from not existing 4 years ago or 5 years ago as an entity. Today, we're the second largest funder of science in this field in the world, second only to the US federal government, with the largest philanthropy funding aging biology and healthy aging in the world. About 200 scientists are funded today by Hevolution research grants. The first 4 biotech companies we funded, all of which were in animal and what we call preclinical stages, being tested in cells and mice, are actually now got technologies being tested in humans. That is extremely unusual to go from, in all 4 out of 4 now progressing. And it speaks to the demand was there, the solutions that were there, but what was missing was the strategic funding and the coaching and guidance we've given as a team. And if you look across. And then the third is we want to convene people. We want to bring the best ideas and exchange ideas. We launched that with our HealthSpan Summit. That was the first one, was almost 2.5 years ago. The last one we held, which was February of 2025, was the largest convening of such a meeting ever to occur in the world. We had 3,000 plus people register from 80 countries, and we had every sector represented. That's been unprecedented. So I'll let you decide on whether that's successful, but any criteria to go from not existing to being the biggest player in the field in philanthropy, to being the largest convener of the field, and to have accelerated technologies from animal research into humans. That's pretty good going.
Yeah, it certainly is. So my understanding from what you've been saying is, so your platform, you've got an incubating function as well, bringing together all these great minds. And as well as setting it all up, you've got some results already, haven't you? Just tell us what's been achieved, for example. I read something about some breakthroughs in the field of hepatitis B research, for example.
Yeah, so while hepatitis B isn't our focus, there's a lot to be learned by viral diseases like hepatitis B. So I think it's important to understand, why would a healthy aging company or a healthy aging entity be interested in this? Well, it turns out that when a virus infects a human cell, whether it's COVID or hepatitis, that virus enters the cell, hijacks the cell to use the cell to reproduce itself. But in the process, it actually not only damages the cell, but it causes aging of those cells that it infects. What we've learned is there is an acceleration in the aging process in many viruses when they come into the human cell environment. And so this is one of those win-win. If we can figure out how to not only retain the health and slow down the aging process of the cell, the host cell, it actually may be able to kick the virus out because it's more vigorous, it's more. So in the example of hepatitis B, about 80% of people who get infected with hepatitis B will eventually shed the virus and recover. 10 to 20% will keep that virus for the rest of their life in their body, and they're what we call chronic carriers. That would be okay, but they can not only pass the virus to other people because they're carriers, but they can cause long-term damage to the liver and eventually, in some cases, liver cancer. And cancer increases risk as you age. So there is a tight link between aging process and cancer. So one of the companies that we're very interested in was looking at how the virus changes what we call the epigenetics within the cell, the host cell. And by intervening at that molecular level, in animals show you can actually allow the cell to heal and kick the virus out, essentially. And so it cures. But that was done in animals. The exciting part is the first human trials have now started, which means the regulatory authorities have looked at the animal safety data, looked at the animal efficacy data, and have confidence that this is now worth testing in humans. Early stages, it's a huge jump to go from mice and animals to actually humans. And that's where we are. So it's a great example.
And just listening to you there, Dr. Khan, and when I hear buzzwords like aging and anti-aging, there's a tendency immediately to start thinking about an aesthetic dimension, because that's often what we associate with aging. And let's face it, there's a bit of vanity around the world, isn't there? So people want to look young as well as feel young. Are there some aesthetic benefits from tackling aging? And will people having longer, healthier lives also look younger?
Well, let's separate out, first of all, the sort of sometimes perception. We did a survey of people around the world and asked them, what is the most important thing that is to you personally as you age? And there were three things that were most important. They wanted to remain mentally functional and independent, physically functional and independent, and financially functional and independent. And interestingly, the third one is very related to the first two, because cost of being taken care of, productivity, all the rest of it. And then the fourth one is they don't want to appear old. So it is important, but not at the cost of the first three. You can look young, but not be able to think, not be able to move. And the amazing thing is, in the biology of this, you don't have to choose between them. We talked about the example in the liver, but the skin cells age as well. And we all know, as skin cells age, they lose their structure, they lose the rigor, and we look at this as manifesting as wrinkles, as changes in the skin integrity. So the question is, how do you figure out how to slow the skin cells from aging, just like muscle, or liver, or eye, or brain? And we have invested in that science. We have a company we're investing in that's actually looking at a model of skin aging. And again, if you think of the hepatitis example, we said, where should we look for that? Well, there are skin diseases that are a model for accelerated skin aging. So psoriasis is a good example. Patients with psoriasis have skin lesions where you've got a lot of inflammation in that area of the skin. Usually we don't know why, but if you actually study those cells that are affected by psoriasis, they're actually older, they're aging fast. And so being able to deliver topically something that you apply to the skin that can not only treat the psoriasis, but treat the underlying biological aging process will not only help the skin heal, but actually brings that youthful rigor back into those skin cells. We actually have that being tested, just like in the hepatitis example, was tested in animals, but it is now undergoing human trials. First, to see if we could treat the psoriasis in a very different approach. But you can imagine, let one's imagination run from here and say, well, if it works by slowing down the accelerated aging of a certain skin disease, what could it do to other areas? And let's see. So these are not things that are one versus the other. That's the great thing.
Okay, Dr. Khan, just tell us a little bit about the structure of Hevolution. For example, what percentage of people involved are Saudi nationals? Just give us a sense of who's involved.
So Hevolution was created because of a vision of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. And it's his vision that led to our mission statement, our vision statement, and he's the chairman of our board. And we're really fortunate because we have very senior leaders guiding us at the board level, including His Royal Highness. We have several ministers. Prince Abdullah bin Bandar is the chairman of our executive committee. And so that's at the governance of the organization, headquartered here in Riyadh. Our organization, from a composition point of view, 3/4 of our employees and team members are Saudi citizens, Saudi nationals, based predominantly here in Riyadh. So we're unique, not only in what we do, how we do it, but even our composition. We're leading this global initiative for the benefit of all from Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. We have satellite office in Boston, where we have about 15 or so employees that are fully subsidiary of us. We're divided up into 4 main groups. One leads the investments. That is the capital we invest in biotech companies, just like any other venture fund, but we're unique because 100% of our profits from the fund go back into the foundation. We want to be successful financially to promote the field, but we're not primarily looking for profits for the foundation. We want it to make it attractive for the private sector to enter. The second major group is our research funding group, where as a philanthropy, we fund predominantly universities, scientists around the world, including in Saudi Arabia. We have over 20 Saudi scientists now funded by Hevolution around the country and in the kingdom that have taken on aging research for the first time in their careers because Hevolution has made this field attractive, first by providing funding, but also by creating awareness in the scientific field. The third group is the group that is responsible for convening all of the things we talked about. They manage the communications, but also host the Global Health Span Summit, which I talked about earlier, and took it from non-existent to being the meeting in the world to be at. And then the fourth group is now working on how do we translate this global footprint into operational research and clinical practice. Headquartered again, our vision is for that should be based out of the kingdom. So the first 2 are operational. The third and fourth, the translational stuff, are actually in strategic design and getting ready. So that's the structure of the organization, but we're a global team. We're just proud, including myself, to be Saudi citizens managing this, leading this for the benefit of humanity.
And you're about to get a little bit more global, aren't you? Because, well, you already mentioned that satellite office in Boston, but haven't you got plans to expand even beyond the United States as well?
Well, in some ways, we already are. One of our research, the companies we mentioned, is actually conducting its human trials in France. Another one is conducting its research trials in New Zealand. And so our footprint, and another one, we have activity in the UK. So we're already operationally present in North America, UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and obviously, as I mentioned, the Kingdom, which is where our headquarters is. We have established physical presence with employees in North America. We're looking at the UK and Europe as a next step, and potentially a site in Asia, because there's so much now going on in this field in Asia. I mean, the continent with the greatest number of older people is Asia because of China. China has a huge aging population, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, where the population now of people over the age of 60 is approaching 30+%. That's 1 in 3 citizens are now over the age of 60.
Right, and things are heading very much in that direction, aren't they? I mean, as we've been saying, 2 billion people over the age of 60 by the year 2050. I mean, that's double the number today, and that makes Hevolution all the more relevant, all the more significant, doesn't it? Not just for Saudi Arabia, but for the entire world.
Nobody wants to live longer to be dependent. Remember, we know that. But if we can keep people healthy as long as possible, that will reduce the economic and human burden on society. And as I said, many societies are already at the point now where they cannot sustain this. Even wealthy countries like Scandinavia don't have enough of a workforce to even take care of their older population. And so this is also becoming not only a demographic issue, but a workforce challenge. There are not enough young people to do that. I'll give you one other statistic. In over 90% of US states, of the 50 US states, over 90% of them, the #1 employer now is healthcare. That tells you something. When your economy starts to be driven by a service sector of providing health to your citizens, then, 30 years ago, it was manufacturing. And that's very topical these days. We talk about manufacturing jobs. The reality is the huge growth that could happen in the service sector of healthcare. And that's not a sustainable curve. And US can't do it. Your home country, United Kingdom, cannot do it. Europe cannot do it. So there's lots of things. That workforce that's now being employed in healthcare could be contributing to society in other ways.
Okay, let's talk about this figure of $1 billion US per year, which is what Hevolution has. Let's put this into context, because we're talking here about, it sounds like a really significant sum of money, but it's an investment, isn't it? And, you think $1 billion, you think, oh, what a lot of money. But in fact, I mean, it could bring about dividends in the future. Just help us and our viewers understand that number and put it into context for us.
It is and it isn't. Let me give you some comparators, which is somewhat a double-edged sword for us. We're celebrating we're the largest philanthropy in this field in the world. I would like to think that 10 years from now, we're like the 10th or 20th largest, even at this scale, because a lot more investment and a lot more research funding has come into this field, given the international scope of things. Today, as we speak, the US NIH has an annual budget of $40 billion. 20 billion of that is on cancer research. The second biggest is on cardiovascular and metabolic disease. Aging, the National Institute of Aging gets $4 billion, 1/10 of the budget. And so it makes you think, doesn't it, that your largest cost to the US federal government is Medicare and aging, when you spend 10% of your research budget on aging. And 50% of your 20 billion is going to cancer. Not that it shouldn't, but it asks the question, the #1 cause of cancer is the aging process itself. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer. It's the #1 risk for cancer is aging. So shouldn't we be thinking about how do you prevent those cancers from occurring as a result of this biology versus treating them once they occur? That's the dilemma. So I agree with you. It is a significant investment by our board and the Saudi government and the Saudi kingdom, but it's nothing compared to what could be and what's happened. By the way, 30 some years ago, there was no cancer research programs, tiny. And it was once global awareness rose to the levels it is now, that government started pouring money into cancer, and look at the dramatic results. Cancer used to be a terminal diagnosis. More than half of cancers are eminently treatable today because of that investment. I would like to think 30 years from now, we will look back and say Hevolution was not only the pioneer that started that whole movement, catalyzed it, but eventually brought so much more to the table because of those collaborations and others that entered this field.
Dr. Khan, we're coming to the end, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you about what role artificial intelligence is playing in your field. I mean, is it helping to bring about breakthroughs faster than would otherwise be the case?
So, absolutely yes, no question. We're able to calculate, model, predict biology in a way that we could not have envisioned 10 years. There's no question. What has really broken through in this field is not only our ability to understand biology better, but we can take massive amounts of data and interpret them and look for patterns in a way we couldn't before. A human can do it. But let us not forget that AI and machine learning, which is built on, and reasoning are tools. I'm old enough to start in college with a slide rule. Now I'm really a dinosaur, I know. But those were tools. Then we got calculators, then we got spreadsheets, then we got computers. So in that evolution, our tools have got more and more powerful. There's no question. One of the companies that I mentioned in the whole skin aging process has actually been using AI to optimize which molecules and how to target skin cells. So we're already using them in our ecosystem and in the research programs we fund or the companies we invest in. But it's going to continue to take both. Once you have a machine model through that learning, you've got to go back and test it, figure out new variables, and then update the models again. And that's iterative mechanism between the wet lab and the in silico lab are critical. We're doing both.
Okay, so the bottom line is that societies really need to care, don't they, about extending the healthy human lifespan. Can you just summarize for us in a couple of words why it's so important for societies to take this on board? And perhaps you can give us an example or something in the context of Saudi Arabia.
We all need to think about healthy aging at a personal level. It affects every one of us. At a family level, because we have dependents that are our loved ones. At a national level, all populations, including the kingdom, are now going through this demographic change. Let's take a look at Saudi Arabia. It's a very young population. 50% of the population is under 25. However, the birth rate in the kingdom, for lots of good reasons, has dropped from 6 children per couple to 2.2. That means this current young population will one day become a substantial in size older population without a lot of young people behind them. We need to care now on how to keep these young people healthy as they age. It's an opportunity for the kingdom, which many countries like Europe and North America don't have the luxury of actually planning ahead. Vision 2030 has a key part of it that says, how do we keep the Saudi population healthy and let them age in a healthy way? Free from chronic diseases, free from the complications. It's very consistent with Vision 2030. It's very important for the kingdom. It's very important for the Gulf. But it's important for every country on the planet.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Mehmood Khan, CEO of the Hevolution Foundation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your interest. Truly appreciate it.
Well, I'm here now with Ali Reza, the Chief Investment Officer of Haytham and Company. Ali, you were listening in there to that interview with Dr. Khan. Just wondering what stood out for you?
Tom, I think the resounding message there was preventative care over sick care. And it's a field of medicine or life sciences that I've paid a lot of attention to, especially in recent years. It's interesting, actually. A few months ago, I went for my regular blood checkup. And actually, I saw one of my old doctors in Australia, and when I received the markers, thankfully most things were seemingly positive, as he said. But I recall asking him on one of the metrics, "Hey, this seems a little low. I mean, at least at the bottom of the range," and it was related to the kidney or liver or something. And I remember asking, "What can we do here?" And the response I got was, "No, no, everything's okay." And I said, "I understand everything's okay, but what could we improve here?" And I think this experience is very common for a lot of people in that in longevity or life sciences related investments, often, the way the world healthcare systems are traditionally designed, we're focused on sick care rather than preventative care. That seems to be the theme. And a dear friend of mine from the segment made an interesting comment to me recently. He said, one of the challenges with investing in longevity and really allocating sizable budgets to the overall allocation is the fact that the KPIs are not as measurable as the sick or responsive care. And I think this is a really interesting takeaway we can pick up from what Dr. Khan was just sharing with us. In the kingdom, there's, as we know, a very expansive set of investments and economic development initiatives underway, which target the near term or the mid to near term. But this is a great example of an area which has payoffs in the very long term, but is an absolutely critical, very important initiative to invest in. And already Hevolution being one of the world's largest research enterprises in this space, I think that's, just yet another testament to the ambition of what Vision 2030 is. And let's not forget, Vision 2030, which we speak about regularly, Tom. Yes, it's about a thriving economy, but it's about a healthy nation, an ambitious nation, and it's as much about not only the individual's longevity, but the nation's longevity. And I think this is very much in line with that overall ambition.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's that idea that a healthy economy has got to have a healthy population to support it. Just looking, where else we could sort of take the conversation. Longevity, as I said to Dr. Khan there, we tend to think of it as having a slightly aesthetic dimension as well. Aging, anti-aging procedures and treatments are something we hear a lot about. There's huge potential, isn't there, in this region, and in particular in this field. It sounds like Saudi Arabia is really leading the way here.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I won't speak to the depth of the science here, but if you sleep well, you hydrate, you look after your general health markers, and you maintain your well-being, both physical and mental, you tend to look better, first of all. And that can be translated to we could look at this in the broader aesthetic sense. I think there's great appetite also for the aesthetic aspect of life sciences or longevity. But it certainly extrapolates over the whole cycle. I think that the two coincide quite well. This is not simply, it's a case of preventing issues. It's a case of ensuring mental well-being. It's a case of ensuring that we reduce dependence, and that as the population ages, it remains healthy and happy and can continue to live a fulfilling life. And as Dr. Khan just mentioned, in Asia, there's an aging population, which is somewhat of a challenge. And, China is a big driver for this, given the elderly population. And if you want the nation to enjoy all of the economic prosperity and resilience, you have to ensure that they can enjoy it well and truly into a later time in life. So I think it coincides across the range.
Yeah, we tend to think of the Saudi population as being a young population. But of course, they won't be young forever, will they? And none of us are, unfortunately. But if we just to wrap up, think about that figure of $1 billion a year being allocated to the Hevolution Foundation. As we were saying, it sounds like a lot of money, but in fact, it's an investment that's going to pay pretty significant dividends, isn't it? I know you can't put a number on it, but they are there, aren't they?
Well, first of all, Tom, I'll just say I like to think I'm young at heart, so perhaps not everyone of us is aging, but age is just a number, as they say. The investment, once again, reconciling what Dr. Khan was sharing, what I've heard in personal experience on multiple occasions is that one of the challenges here is the attribution of investment efforts to direct impact, particularly in the short term. So it really takes an ambitious DNA. It takes, vision and insight, to use the same language. I mean, it takes a group or people that really, really can extrapolate this in far into the future and recognize that whilst, it may seem like research projects or venture in the short term, it's far more than that. I mean, the healthcare budgets of most advanced nations, the OECD nations, if you look at those, let alone, the broader world, combining all those budgets across the different regions, we are already investing. The world is investing far beyond perhaps what it would take. Maybe it would take a fraction to really extend the lifespan of mankind and spread that across many nations to ensure healthier, happier lives, not just in Saudi Arabia, but for the world. But it's a case, in my opinion, of rebalancing, it's reallocations, right? So as Dr. Khan mentioned, in the US, 40 billion is going into healthcare, and yet less than 10% is invested into this field. Something we should question there.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Ali Reza, the Chief Investment Officer of Haytham & Company. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Well, that's all we've got time for this special edition of the Riyal Deal Plus here on Al Arabiya English. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. We'll see you again very soon.